So yeah, just as usual, obviously with one of these sessions, if you keep your microphones muted, you might want to turn off your camera as well, just because we will be recording the session. And so your face might be in the bottom of the screen if you have your camera on. Questions can be put into the meeting chat throughout the event. We will pick them up, like I said, hopefully like throughout the session, but there's also space for a Q&A at the end, an opportunity to answer some further questions. We also took the questions from last week's information event and put them all into kind of one document. And so we will add to that and send that around on the chest. I'm going to email out these slides after the event, so you've all got access to them, and that will go out to everyone who's attended today and our mailing list. This session will be recorded. I am still having a bit of trouble with the technological aspect of sharing the recording, but I am working on that, so hopefully I'll be able to get that to you maybe this week or in the new year possibly, but I will keep you all updated. But we are recording it, so we do have a copy when we are able to then send them out. Okay, so what we're going to go through today is really kind of like a run through of the entire application process for the FPS. It is quite long and detailed. Hopefully you'll find today's session really useful in showing you exactly what kind of we're expecting from your applications, what you'll need to do. So we're going to go through the minimum standards. We're going to do a response document, a walkthrough of the SSQ response document, which is kind of the main document for kind of new applicants. You have to pass everything on there to join the FPS essentially. We'll go through that in more detail. We'll also go through the requirements matrix sections, give you some top tips, and then also let you know about our drop-in sessions that are happening in the new year. Okay, so what is the FPS? This is a quick overview. So it is, in essence, a list of approved providers. It is a bit more than that, but people who've successfully completed our application process, been through due diligence, and they're eligible to be invited to bid for procured activity. This is the 6th reopening of the FPS. We currently have 118 organisations approved on the framework. We anticipate that the FPS will reopen every calendar year from this opening onwards, and the frequency may be more or less as required by GMCA. So as this opening will go on until 2023, we anticipate that the next opening will probably be at some point in 2024. So that's one of the reasons why we think it's crucial for people to try and get onto the FPS while they can now. It commenced in November 2020 and is a potential 10-year framework, so that's 5 years plus 5. Around 22 contracts have been awarded by GMCA, totalling approximately £27.8 million. And we currently have 2 further competitions out to market or in the evaluation stage, totalling £21.3 million. And that includes our AB further competition. This is the link to the advert. You'll get that on the slides when I send them around after. Okay, so what are the minimum standards for joining the FPS? Applicants are required to pass all sections in the 03 SSQ response document. So more detail on each of these sections will be given during this session. As I said, we're going to do a walkthrough of the document. We've also produced an applicant instructions and guidance document. And I'd really recommend you go and have a read of that, because that goes through in quite a lot of detail exactly what you need to do to complete your application. It's what we're going through today, but I think you'll find it really helpful to read the document as well. If you fail on any mandatory question within the 03 SSQ response document, your whole application will be rejected. All sections of the requirements matrix, however, are optional. So we recommend that you just apply for the things that you currently deliver, that you have a track record of delivering, as that's what you will pass on. If you don't have a track record of delivering them, we won't be able to kind of pass you, because you won't be able to give us the evidence we're looking for. But the requirements matrix is what our purchasing bodies use to filter a list of providers to find out what they're approved to deliver, and that determines what people will be invited to bid for at a further competition. This will make a little bit more sense in a bit when I go through the requirements matrix. So as I said, you should apply for the requirements matrix sections that are most appropriate to your experience and capability. We don't expect a response from every requirements matrix section. You don't need to write in the boxes that you don't deliver the thing. It's just, we just want you to put in kind of like responses for the bits that you can deliver. And finally, acceptance onto the FPS is not a guarantee of work. It means that you're then available to be invited to bid on a mini competition for as a prime provider, but it's not a guarantee of work. This is a bit of information about the applicants to the FPS. Essentially, what type of applicant you are determines what type of the documentation that you'll need to complete. So new applicants who have never submitted an application to the FPS before will be required to complete and submit all documentation. So what I mean by that is you'll need to complete and submit the entirety of the 03 SSQ response document. And then you'll also need to complete and submit the bits that are relevant to you of the 04 requirements matrix, which is the only Excel document in the suite of documents on the chest. And then also the relevant 05 response documents that correspond with the things that you're applying for in the requirements matrix. But you do need to complete and submit the entirety of the SSQ response document. Reapplicants are applicants who have submitted an application before, but who did not pass the minimum standards to join the FPS. So you've applied before, but you have failed to join the FPS. So you will be required to complete all documentation, but on your 03 response document, you will only need to complete the bits that you have failed previously. Anything that you have passed previously, you don't have to complete. And you can find out which bits of the SSQ you have passed and failed before on your Appendix 1, which you would have been sent with your feedback letter from the previous opening that you've applied for. So, for example, if you're going through your Appendix 1 and you can see that you have passed absolutely everything on the SSQ apart from the 6.1.2 track record question, the only thing you need to complete in the document is the 6.1.2 track record question and sign the declaration in the SSQ response document. If you've passed like safeguarding, for instance, if you've passed the IG section, you don't need to complete those again. We have a record that you've passed them. So on the SSQ response document, you just need to complete the bits that you have failed previously. And then you also need to complete the relevant bits of the requirements matrix and the corresponding 05 response documents as usual. And then finally, we have additional applicants. And so these are people who are already on the FPS and who wish to apply for additional requirements matrix sections. I should also say here that at these reopenings, it's about you can apply for additional requirements matrix sections, but you can also make changes to the locations that you're approved to deliver in and also the contract values that you're able to deliver in. So if you are now able to deliver larger contracts, you can use this opening to tweak that information in your documentation. So organisations who are already on the FPS don't need to complete the 03 response document because you have already passed it. However, you do still need to go in there and sign the declaration. I know this is a little bit complicated. Sign the declaration, and that's all you need to do on the 03 response document. And the other bits of documentation, so you just need to fill in the requirements matrix and the 05 response documents. So as I've said here, all applicants, so including those already on the FPS, need to sign the signed declaration. And as I have also said previously, please read the application instructions and guidance in full because you'll find that really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this presentation now and start sharing the SSQ response document, and I'll do a walkthrough here. I can't see that we've had any questions on that so far, so hopefully that has made sense. I feel like it'll make more sense as I go through these documents and you can have a proper look at them as well. Let me just get open the Word document. Lovely, here we go. Hopefully you can all see that now. So this is the SSQ response document. It's quite detailed and it is quite long. So I'm going to go through this and show you what you need to complete. I'm just going to zoom in a bit so it's just showing one page at a time. Lovely. So we've got obviously here notes for completion. I'm not going to go through these now because that will take a long time, but please do make sure you've kind of read through everything that we've put in here. We've got kind of some information about the requirements for your application submission and about the verification of information provided and confidentiality. So like I said, please read through those details kind of in full before you submit your application. Now we're going to get on to what you actually need to complete. So part 1 is quite simple. It's potential supplier information. So please fill in this kind of not to talk at this time on a Monday morning, as applicable. So we've got information about the name of your organisation, registered address, and so on, trading status, company or charity registration number, and yep, so on. So hopefully that all makes sense. Great for you to fill in these bits if it's applicable to you. So whether you're an SME or a VCSE or public service mutual or so on, we like to have that information for our records as it is important for some of the work that we're doing. So I'm just going to keep going through because this is all kind of self-explanatory, I think. We've got a bit here about the bidding model and if you're bidding as the lead contact in a group of economic operators. So fill that in if that's applicable to you. Sorry, I know I'm scrolling through this quite quickly. If everybody could fill this in, even the people who are reapplying. So this is one of the declarations. There's two. There's this one here, and then there's one at the end of this document. So this is just so obviously we have the name of your organisation and also contact email and address. So we make sure that we have all the details sent to the right thing. And so, you know, when we're completing your feedback letter and your contract, we have the right addresses and so on to put on that. Okay, so the next section is exclusion grounds. So we have grounds for mandatory exclusion. And this is, part 2, section 2. So information about kind of participation in a criminal organisation and corruption. I think obviously if you pick yes to any of these, I believe you fail. We have more details about this in the application instructions and guidance. We go through every single section on this SSQ document in quite a lot of detail. And then part 3 is grounds for discretionary exclusion, and same thing, if you could please go through each one of these and pick an answer. We are required to fail you if you don't complete this information, so it is really important that that you actually do put an answer to every single one of these. I know there are quite a lot of them, but I think this is a standard SSQ template. Section 4 is economic and financial standing. I have a slide about this after I've finished this walkthrough, so just to give you a bit more detail, but we would like a copy of your full and abbreviated audited accounts for the last 3 years submitted as part of your application. And if you're unable to provide that, we want you to provide one of the following here. So because we do realise that obviously some organisations are new and will not have the full 3 years, so you do have an option to kind of complete one of these. Please just mark what you have put in, and yeah. And like I said, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail in the next slide, so I can give you a bit more information about that. For technical and professional ability, section 5, we'd like you to provide details of 3 contracts that are relevant to the authority's requirement. So these contracts should have been performed during the last 3 years, and VCSEs may include samples of grant-funded work. So this is just a bit of information, and we would like obviously the name of the customer organisation and things like the contract value date, when the contract started and finished. So we would like 3 examples in this section. So section 6 is where we start asking for your written responses in terms of some of our kind of core questions. So we have 3 supply suitability questions in section 6. First one is GM priorities. So this is about you being able to demonstrate a clear understanding of the priorities for the education, skills and employment landscape in Greater Manchester. So this question is quite detailed. I'll just read it out to you. So please describe how your organisation works with stakeholders to ensure that your provision provides clear progression pathways within learning and or work by responding to local strategic priorities or local needs as set out in the Greater Manchester Strategy and Local Industrial Strategy. Both of those documents, by the way, are available in our documentation. Yeah, we've put links in there. You can also find those on GMCA's website. So I believe they might be in the descriptive document, but I think the links to them are in the descriptive document. So your response must include a description of how you've identified and responded to priorities relating to Greater Manchester labour markets, cohorts, etc., and evidence of how your provision aligns with the local education skills and employment opportunities and needs. So we want brief illustrative examples. They don't need to be fully developed case studies, as I said, but brief practical examples of where you've identified a need and responded effectively. So you have between 400 and 500 words for this response, and that includes kind of any diagrams or charts which can be included, and hyperlinks are not permitted. So as I said, this is one of the core questions, and we're really looking for kind of an understanding of the priorities within Greater Manchester. Section 2 is track record and quality, and you need to kind of provide evidence of both of those things. So please make sure you've kind of paid attention to how the question has been laid out. So we want you to provide a short case study of one programme or project your organisation has delivered. And we also want you to provide an outline of your quality assurance framework, which must include, as a minimum, governance of quality and so on. Again, this question is between 400 and 500 words in response. And again, any wording that includes any wording within kind of diagrams or charts. So we don't want kind of like screenshots kind of within your answer. Please make sure you've kind of read all of these bullet points, because we do find that people will get failed for not responding to kind of track record or quality. So yeah, make sure you've had a proper read through of this. The third question, we've actually made a slight tweak to since last time, because we have had a lot of people fail this question, and we wanted to make it slightly clearer. That is one thing I'd like to say to everyone. If you've applied before, please make sure you've got the most recent documentation that's uploaded to the chest downloaded to complete. This is because we've made tweaks to this document, and we've also made tweaks to the requirements matrix response documents. And we want to make sure you have the most up-to-date version. The tweaks have been made to try and make things a bit easier for you. So hopefully this will actually help kind of when you're trying to respond to these questions. Can I just ask that everyone's got themselves on mute, because I can just hear a bit of noise in the background. Thank you. So this question is about demonstrating that you have robust performance management and reporting structures that are in place that are pertinent to your organisation. So we need you to provide this clear outline of how you manage and report service delivery to meet contractual requirements. And we've split this answer out into 2. Your answer must include, but it's not limited to, the following: you outlining how you manage your information and what systems you use. And we want examples there of how you retain evidence to ensure compliance with various funding streams and commissioning bodies. And then also we would like to know what approach you use to monitor progress and performance, and what actions do you take to mitigate poor performance within your organisation and your supply chain. And we want examples there as well, including how it was communicated to your commissioner. I should say in all of your responses, we are more than happy for you to use headings and write paragraphs underneath it. They don't need to be kind of completed like an essay. We are happy for you to use kind of like bullet points in your answer if that makes it clearer, if that allows you to kind of communicate more information in the kind of small word count that you do have. So that is something to kind of think about. We'll go through this a bit more in top tips later. But that is something to think about when you're kind of completing your answer. How can you make it as clear as you possibly can to the evaluators? So those are the three Section 6 supply suitability questions. Section 6.2 is about the requirements matrix. So here we just want you to say that you've done these things, because these things are found in separate documents, and I'll go through these in a minute after I've finished this walkthrough. We need you to complete the 04 requirements matrix Excel spreadsheet, where basically you just go through and you tick what you're applying for. That just helps us to accurately give your responses to the correct evaluators. So please make sure you've kind of filled that in correctly, because we don't want there to be any kind of confusion about what you've applied for. And then you also need to complete each of the relevant requirement response documents, which are all here. But as I said, I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail in a minute. Section 7 is on social value. So this first bit is about suppliers are asked to confirm their understanding of GMCA's commitment to social value, and that the social value framework will be applied to contracts at the further competition stage. The second question is about the use of the social value portal. If you've been applying for any of our contracts in the last couple of months, you'll know that we have shifted to start using the social value portal. We want you to confirm that you're willing to use the portal at further competition stage where applicable. We say where applicable because the FPS is not just used by GMCA, it's also used by local authorities, and GMP are also eligible to use it. So they may not be using the social value portal, and some of GMCA's work might not be using it, but we need you to confirm that you're willing to use it, because it might be used at further competition stage down the line. And as I said, currently is on, for example, AEB and Multiply. This is another written question, section 7. So we need you to provide, this is on social value, 2 examples to describe how your organisation has previously delivered social value. So the examples provided in your response should demonstrate alignment with one or more of the 6 priorities within the social value framework. I should just say, going up, there's a hyperlink here to the social value framework, so you've got easy access to that to kind of see what the priorities are. You should be specific in terms of what the added value of the social value delivered was over and above core contract delivery and outcomes. So we don't want to read about work that you were doing that was directly as part of a contract. It needs to be added social value, not core contract delivery. And we also want you to describe the measurable impact of the social value delivery. So again, this answer is between 400 and 500 words. Again, we're happy for you to use headings and so on. We need you to provide 2 examples, as it says here. So if you don't provide 2 examples, we will have to fail this, which is a real shame, because in the past we've had some fantastic examples, but only 1 example's been provided. So it's not kind of fitted in with our requirements for this question. So question 7 is the end of the written responses within the SSQ document. The rest of it is mostly ticking yes and no and so on. So we have section 8, which is the Modern Slavery Act 2015, and it's just the required questions linked to that. So again, go through, as I have said, the application instructions and guidance document is really helpful for you to use. We go through in detail about what constitutes a pass and what constitutes a fail. So you'll be able to kind of see from that document what is a pass and what is a fail. So really helpful for you to have a read through that before you kind of complete this document. So as I said, section 8, modern slavery. Section 9 is insurance, so we just need you to self-certify whether you already have or can commit to obtain. These are standard levels, and it's a legal requirement that you hold some of them, so the employer's liability insurance, and that requirement is not applicable to sole traders. As it says here, you should note that GMCA and other purchasing bodies may request higher levels of insurance at further competition stage. Okay, section 10 is information governance. This is quite a lengthy section, and you are required to pass this. This is the self-certification stage. We will be doing further questions and documentation check at further competition stage if you're applying for that. We just need you to self-certify this. So section 10.1, this is all required. So you need to complete all of this and you need to have all of these policies. If you don't have these policies, we are not able to pass you. That is just what has been given to us by our IG team. So that is the case. So as you can see, it is quite lengthy. So I think it's really important for everybody to make sure that they've maybe looked at this section in advance. Don't leave this one until the last minute, because obviously you might need support from your information governance team to find out whether you have all of these documentations. At this stage for IG, you don't need to attach the policies to your application. You just need to self-certify. So you just need to tell us, like, yes, you need to tell us the name of your document, whether it's an internal one or an external, and you need to tell us where this information is within the document. But you don't actually need to give us the documentation because it's self-certification. So as you can see, all of that. And then section 10.2, this bit's for information only. So if you don't have any of these sections, you won't fail the IG section. This is, yeah, we just need to know this information, but you don't have to have it at this stage. But I should say that some of these things may be a requirement at further competition stage, and that's partially why they're asked. One thing it's really important for you to add is the information on the data protection officer. So, and then please also make sure you fill in this bit about the submission and a signature and date in there. Section 11 is health and safety. So again, that is self-certifying that you have a policy and answering all of these sections as well. It's quite lengthy. Section 12 is safeguarding. This is also self-certification, but one thing with the safeguarding section is you do need to submit your safeguarding policy as part of the application. We have failed people for this section in the past when they have kind of completed the section, but they've not submitted their safeguarding policy. So please can everybody make sure they have submitted it, because yeah, it's really important for us to know that you have it. This is all kind of like self-explanatory, but yes, if you can go through and answer all of these sections. Section 13, contract performance and management. So again, you need to self-certify that you will accept and conform to the contract.
Molly, you've just muted yourself, sorry.
I actually did not mute myself, somebody else muted me. So that's a good sign. Hopefully you can all hear me now.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. So contract performance management, yeah, if you can just mark this yes, no. Environment, again, we need you to complete this bit, but again, this is self-certifying. These sections are new, so again, this is another reason why we need you to complete to download the updated documentation off our website. So this information is currently all for information only. It might not be in the future. In the future, it might be required, and that's part of the reason why we're asking it. So you need to let us know whether you're accredited as a living wage employer, and so on. So as this is information only, you won't fail for marking any of these as no. But we might fail you for this section if you don't answer it, if that makes sense. So please just make sure you've completed it, even if the answer's no. And again, we've got a section on the Good Employment Charter, and that's for information only, and also carbon reduction plan. And again, that's information only. Section 16 is the legislation, so please answer yes, no to any of those. Section 17 is freedom of information. And section 18 is the declarations that I have gone on and on about. So sorry for being very boring on this. Everybody applying, reapplying for the FPS needs to complete this declaration. So the one at the top that has the information about your organisation, and then this one at the bottom here, we just need you to sign that. So that is 39 pages of the SSQ response document. Hopefully that was quite helpful. I'm going to go back to my presentation now, but I'm just going to stop sharing and have a look at these questions. I know Emily's been picking some of these up. Section 10, that's a good question actually about so where you can find the relevant policies for information governance. So we're looking for your policies. Yeah, we need you to complete to let us know about the policies that you have. So I don't think we can give advice on where to find relevant policies elsewhere, if that makes sense. Okay, hopefully you can all see that back again. So just to give you a bit more information on the economic and financial standing, just to interrupt myself, will a link to the SSQ doc be sent to us? All of the documentation, all of the documentation is available on the chest. So when these slides get sent to you, it has a link to the advert to the chest, and you can go on there and log in. But all of the documentation is available on the chest. So GMCA will rate applicants red, amber, green, depending on the Dun & Bradstreet and Company Watch credit reports and all their submitted financial information. So those rated red or amber will be subject to additional financial due diligence. The credit reports, together with the information provided by the applicant in response to the economic and financial standing section, will be used by GMCA to undertake due diligence. If the credit reports are not available, GMCA will use other financial information provided by the applicant to assess your economic and financial standing. So when we conclude there is insufficient information to assess the applicant's economic and financial standing, or the information available leads to GMCA to conclude the information provided is not acceptable, you might be asked to provide further information. So we will send you a message via the chest. So it's important to keep kind of an eye on your kind of chest account. Hopefully you've got notifications set up, so you'll get an email to tell you you've had a message sent. So when the information provided leads to an assessment that your economic and financial standing is unacceptable, you'll fail this section. The minimum annual turnover that GMCA expect to see for the FPS would be no less than 2 times the highest contract value for which you're applying for. So, for example, if you're applying for the contract value of £3 to £5 million, GMCA would expect you to have a minimum annual turnover of £6 million. The scoring criteria on the entirety of the FPS application is a pass-fail. So if you fail, it's where you do not meet the requirement, or our evaluator has serious reservations of your relevant ability, understanding, experience, skills, resource and quality, or if there's no response at all. So this happens more on the requirements matrix sections. Sometimes you've ticked that you've applied for it, but you've actually not written a response in, so obviously you'll be failed on that. And a pass is when you satisfy the requirement and you demonstrate that you have kind of everything that we need to support your response. So I'm going to go through the requirements matrix section here. So this is the tool that we've developed as a way to identify suppliers with the relevant knowledge and experience who can meet our commissioning requirements. So the requirements matrix is divided into 5 criteria, and applicants are invited to review the descriptions against each of the criterion and sub-criteria before completing the requirements matrix, which I think is quite a wordy way of saying just have a read through of everything and see what you're eligible, what you think that you're eligible to kind of apply for in response to kind of like what you do as an organisation, what you deliver. So the 5 sections are the location of supply and applicant specialism, the contract value, characteristic group, interventions, and then the 5th one, again, this is why we want you to make sure you've got the most up-to-date documentation. This used to be called sector specialisms. We have just renamed it to accredited qualifications and bespoke training. It is absolutely the same in terms of the question headings. We've just renamed the document overall to reflect that it covers kind of both accredited and bespoke, because we also have life skills in there as well as sector specialisms. So all applicants need to complete the requirements matrix, but you're not expected to tick everything, and you should focus on the areas where you have relevant experience in delivering the services which meet the descriptions. So essentially, if there's something that you are thinking about delivering, but you haven't done yet, and you don't have experience of yet, you probably don't need to apply for that section, because you won't be able to kind of provide the evidence asked for. But if there is a section that fits in entirely with something that you currently do, absolutely apply for those sections. So I'm just going to go through these sections one by one. So on the requirements matrix, we ask about your location of supply. So you should tick all areas that you currently supply and all areas that you're willing to supply. So there's no evaluation criteria for this section. You'll be accepted on what you tick. Purchasing bodies will probably use this information in their filtering to focus on suppliers who can deliver in their geographical area or immediate neighbour. So that's very relevant if it's, for instance, a local authority who is the purchasing body on a commission. They obviously will probably pick people who can deliver, organisations who can deliver within their LA area. Additional questions may be asked regarding about the location of supply at further competition stage, but they won't here. We also ask for you to tick whether you're a skills or employment provider or both. This information is not evaluated, it's for information purposes only. So this is just to show you what the requirements matrix looks like. So if, for example, you are able to deliver in all of the 10 local authority areas, tick all of them. And obviously, if you're able to deliver in few, if you currently, for instance, deliver in Bolton and Bury, but not the rest, but you're willing to supply the rest, tick in this column here, and then tick in this column for there. So hopefully that's all quite self-explanatory. And then, yeah, tick whether you are a work or skills services provider. And again, that is just for information only. Contract value, we ask for you to indicate all of the contract values up to the highest that you wish to be on the FPS for. So one thing we ask that people sometimes don't do is, could you tick your maximum contract value and all of the values below? That is just because if there is a smaller contract but you've only ticked a higher contract value and none of the others, there runs the risk that you might not be invited for the contract, even though obviously you'd be eligible for it. So yeah, if you just tick your maximum contract value and every single kind of one below. Your financial standing and ability to contract for the indicated value will be evaluated as part of our financial due diligence. So that's what I've just been through on the economic and financial standing section. And as I already said, we require an annual turnover of twice the lower contract value in the highest band you've indicated you would like to be approved for. So just to show you what we mean about the bands, these are the bands that we currently offer. So please copy and paste the tick in all values you wish to be considered for. So, you know, if you can deliver up to £4 million, we want you to tick in this section and then all of the ones below it. But if you can deliver for, as the example said before, so if you've ticked this one, we need you to have an annual turnover of £6 million, if that makes sense. Lovely. Okay, so We have 3 response documents. The first one is on characteristics. You should tick the requirements matrix to show each individual characteristic you wish to apply for. You must complete the relevant sections in the 0.5.1 response document characteristic with your response and evidence to support your application. So characteristics is split into 3 sections. So employment status, which obviously covers things like employed, unemployed, at risk of redundancy and so on. We have demographic considerations that covers some kind of age brackets, but also gender and identity, and people from ethnic minority backgrounds. And then personal circumstances, so that can include sections on supporting people who are homeless or people with an EHCP or people with disabilities and so on. So details of the question, what your response should include, are detailed in the response document. And this, we've slightly tweaked this from last time, so you might have a look at this wording and think, oh, that's slightly different, and that's because it is. So every response should include evidence of a specific programme that you have delivered and how it targets each group you have ticked. So you must include evidence of scale, which is volumes, values and timescales, outcomes and wider impacts. And we want to see some numerical data with a supporting narrative. And the maximum word count is 150 words for each individual section. So just to show you, this is what the requirements matrix looks like for one of these sections. So we just want you to tick. So for example, if you do a program that supports the unemployed, we want you to tick there. And then we want you to go to the response document and complete this. So as you can see the question, we've put in this example. So on that example of the unemployed, if you tick that box, we want you to tell us about a specific program that you've delivered designed to target unemployed individuals. So what we don't want you to see is you saying we run a program and 52% of the people on it are unemployed. We want to know about a program that you specifically designed that is targeted to this cohort group. So you should tell us about what the program is and how you delivered it. You should give us some evidence to show the impact of the programme, and it should include numerical data such as pass rates or satisfaction rates. You shouldn't use the same example multiple times unless the programme reference specifically targets more than one of these groups. So you might provide a programme that does support the unemployed and also those at risk of redundancy. We would be happy for you to use the same example of programme, but we don't want to see just a copy and pasted response. We want you to tell us how it individually targets the group. So even if it does cover target more than one of these cohort groups, we want your answer to cover each of those groups individually. The next the next section is the interventions, and this is the 0.5.2 response document, and this is about intervention activities. So this is split into 3 sections. So section A, which is supporting young people and adults to transition into further learning or work. Section B, which is supporting individuals currently in work. And section C, which is supporting employers. So details of the questions and what your response should be are in details in the response document as before. And again, we want to see specific examples and evidence of delivery, and you must include evidence of scale, outcomes and wider impacts, and again, numerical data with a supporting narrative. So this is an example of the response document. So you can see here a definition of what the intervention is. So for supporting young people and adults to transition into further learning or work, the definition is the delivery of personalised holistic support to enable people to progress into further learning or get a job or become self-employed, which may be designed to meet the needs of people with different needs or characteristics. So again, we want to see specific examples, which I've just gone through. We have an example here of what we want to see. So if you've ticked the engagement box, this one, for example, you should tell us about examples of interventions designed to engage adults or young people. You should tell us about what the intervention is and how you delivered it, and you should give us some evidence to show the impact of your work. And again, that should include numerical data such as achievement rates or satisfaction rates. So really helpful for you to have a good read through of these response documents so you can see exactly kind of what sections we have, see what's most relevant to the work you deliver. The final section is accredited qualifications and bespoke training. So again, this is what was previously called sector specialisms. We've now renamed it, but the sections themselves remain the same. So we have accredited occupation and non-accredited, non-regulated, bespoke or CPD occupation, and then accredited life skills and bespoke life skills. So we have tweaked the questions on these quite a bit too, just to make it a bit clearer about what we want to see. And the maximum word count is 250 words for each individual section. So just to give an example, this is the new accredited occupation question. So please provide a response for all areas you're submitting for, and you should provide evidence of your experience and track record. So what we want to see in each of these sections is an example of previous delivery per each of these sections. So including the funding model. So was this through AEB? Was it an apprenticeship? Was it ESF? And so on. We want to see relevant quality evidence applicable per specialism, so SAR or internal grading if that's applicable. And then we also want to see learner volumes and achievement rates across the range of qualification level up to and including level 7 within the specialism for the 2 previous complete academic years. So for this opening, it'll be 2021 and 21-22. You might want to display that information in a table. I know our evaluators find that quite useful, so please feel free to include a table, but the wording in the table is obviously contributing towards your word count. And then the bespoke question is slightly different. So we want to see your track record of designing and delivering non-accredited, non-regulated qualifications. The delivery needs to be flexible and ensures both the right support for individuals and meets employers' needs. And so that can include, but is not limited to, short course, boot camps, tele-CPD, community learning, or top-up learning. So we want to know the principles of how and why your organisation has responded to bespoke requirements and how you've been flexible and responsive. So you must include evidence of scale, outcomes and wider impacts, and you must include numerical data with a supporting narrative. And so, yeah, you need to do those for each of these sections. So that was the requirements matrix. I'm now going to go through some kind of like top tips for application. In fact, I'm just going to have a quick look at the questions we've had come through. I know that Emily's been answering some.
I'm on top of them all, Molly. I'm just responding to that last one now. So.
Oh, lovely. That's nice. In which case, I'll say that to the end and we can just go through some more questions at the end and I'll go through these top tips. Some of these might seem fairly obvious. We just find it quite helpful just to kind of lay it out for everybody, just so you can kind of see kind of what we're looking for, just hopefully like make you think about what might be needed. So obviously read all of the documents that are published on the chest, including the descriptive document and the application instructions and guidance. That should hopefully just make it really clear about what we're looking for. I'm also uploading the presentations onto the chest. So I've already uploaded the information event from last week. I'll put this up on there too, so you have access to that. You should make a list of all the documents that you're required to complete and return. So, you know, have a look at what type of applicant you are. Are you just doing an additional application, in which case, obviously, your requirements matrix sections are the main thing you're doing, and the only thing you need to do on the O3 response document is sign the declaration, or do you have to completely everything because you're a brand new applicant? Also, make sure you are aware of which internal policies you'll need to return as part of your application. So safeguarding, as I've already mentioned, and what internal policies you need to be aware of. So obviously you need to fill in that entire IG section if you're a new applicant, or if you're reapplying for that section, make sure you're aware of what your policies are. And that links into the next one, which is be clear on the internal resource you'll need to assist with to complete your application. So you might need support from finance, from legal, from IT. Please submit your clarifications through the chest and try and submit multiple questions at once to ensure a quicker response. So it's better if you submit one message that says question 1, question 2, and so on, rather than submitting individual messages. We need them to be submitted through the chest, so we have an audit trail, but what we're doing is we're putting all clarification questions, including the ones coming out in these sessions, into a response document, and we're sending that out. So I'm going to send out the clarification response with the email I'm going to send around this afternoon after this session, and we'll also publish them on the chest. And then also make sure you read the clarification responses that have been published on the chest throughout the application window. That is because it's quite likely that your question might have been answered in there. And so obviously that'll save you some time if you don't have to wait for a new response from us if it's already been answered. So read the question and be sure you understand exactly what it is asking of you. Very obvious, obviously, but it's really helpful to make sure that you're not kind of answering the wrong thing. If the question says your response should include, make sure you include what is requested. And also, if the same information is requested in more than one place, be sure to include it in all places. We have a massive panel of evaluators for this. Every single section on the requirements matrix has a different panel of evaluators. So if you write a response in one section, don't write please see my response later on, because the other evaluator won't see it. So yeah, make sure you include the information in multiple places if it's requested of you. And then, as I've already said, consider the layout of your response. So you can separate it into bullets, you can use headings. If it's easier for us to read and it's really clear about what the information you've included, you are more likely to pass it, and also you're more likely to write an answer that will be passed because you've kind of paid attention to what you're asking for what we're asking of you. You've included all of the information we need to see. The word count is an indication of the detail we're looking for and should be utilised to its full extent. Quite often we'll have answers that are very short, and obviously that's not kind of providing the detail that we're asking for. But also don't go over the word count. Anything over the maximum will not be evaluated, and embedded documents and illustrations with text will be included within the word count unless otherwise specified. I've said that, having said that, please don't embed documents into this response, because our evaluators won't be able to read them. And then when using acronyms, please ensure it's defined the first time it's used. I know we're all like awful for using acronyms constantly, but if you just make it clear what you're talking about in your response. Avoid generic statements which aren't substantiated. Where requested, use brief practical examples to back up the statements, providing the correct evidence. We've used the words quantitative and qualitative in here. We have tweaked that kind of in our response documents. So make sure you've kind of read the question in terms of what evidence we're looking for. Don't provide published data back to us without context. So use the data to tell us how the information has influenced your organisation or the services you provide. So quite often, especially in the GM priorities question, organisations will tell us what, for example, the Greater Manchester Strategy says, but obviously we know what the Greater Manchester Strategy says. We want to know how it's influenced the services you provide. Make sure responses reflect your unique organisational characteristics, so they're not written generically in any way that can apply to any organisation. We can often tell when organisations have used bid writers. Quite often we can tell when organisations have used the same bid writers, because we will see very similar responses in the same application window. So yeah, please make sure your responses reflect your organisation, and you've not written something where you could just kind of pick your name out and put someone else's name in, because that's a real shame, really. Ensure your response is clear and concise, so limit the level of detail needed and don't use up your word count with irrelevant detail. Quite often people respond to what they think we're asking for, but this links into kind of reading the question, look at what we're actually asking for, and make sure you respond to that. And be sure to proofread your application and ensure the version uploaded is the final version with no track changes. Quite often we will get responses back in where it's covering track changes, and it can be quite difficult to read, which again is a real shame. We're not going to fail you for that, but obviously it does make it more difficult to read your response. So yeah, make sure you've had a proofread, which I have not done of this PowerPoint presentation because that should say no track changes, not track changes. So I need to take my own advice. Ensure you leave yourself plenty of time to complete and upload your application. Late applications will not be accepted. That's not just us being strict, it's part of us using the chest platform. Once we've closed the window, we can't reopen it. So we need you to make sure that your application is in before the deadline. I said this in the information session last week, but ideally don't leave it until the last day, the last morning, because if there are any technical issues, we're not able to help you with technical issues. You'll need to go to practice to the chest for that. And it'd just be a real shame if you'd done all of your kind of like hard work in getting your application together and it wasn't actually able to be submitted. So I mean, ideally submit it a few days before the deadline. This is just to tell you about our Back to Basics workshop, which is our next workshop we have coming up on the 18th of January. I should say we are rerunning this application workshop in January too, but obviously you've attended this one, so you don't need to come to that one because it is exactly the same information. If you do have colleagues though who are part of your application and who you think could be would find it useful, they can attend. That is I think it's the 11th of January. The information is all in the information is all going to be in the email I'm going to send you around. But the Back to Basics workshop we're running on the 18th of January is aimed at smaller organisations who have limited experience of bidding for procured activity, but it is open to all organisations who wish to attend. Obviously you are at this application workshop, and so that is fantastic. The Back to Basics workshop is going to be more of an open forum that will flex to your needs. So what we're really looking for is if you're a new or smaller organisation who's applying for this, let us know what information you feel that you're still missing, kind of once after you'd been to this workshop and the one we held last week, and after you've kind of read all of the documentations. We really want feedback to know what we should cover in this session on the 18th of January, because we want it to be helpful for you to actually be able to kind of produce a really good application. So any feedback on content, yeah, drop us an email. The email address is in a couple of slides time, or send us a message through the chest and we can kind of work on that for you. We're also going to be running one-to-one drop-in sessions to answer any questions that you may have about the application process that have not been covered today. So the sessions are not to focus on the content of individual submissions. So it's not for you to come along and say, how do I respond to this? It's more just kind of if you have a question and we've maybe not quite answered it, or you're still struggling to understand a bit about the process, we're more than happy to kind of talk through the process with you. So we're going to hold 3 additional drop-in days, and we'll add more if needed, and they will be the 31st of January, the 2nd of February and the 8th of February. They're so late because we want people to come to the workshops first, because sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. We want you to come to the workshops first because we're hoping that these workshops have actually answered a lot of your questions. We're hoping that the clarification questions have answered a lot of your questions. So yeah, so to attend one of these sessions, please email our email address, which is ewsframework@greatermanchester-ca.gov.uk, and let us know your date and just give us a few time slots. So if you can say something like, I can do the whole morning on the 31st, or you know, between 2 and 4 p.m. on the 2nd of February, we'll then email you an invitation to a 10-minute Teams meeting. There is not a deadline for you to send us actually, no, there probably is a deadline for you to send us content suggestions because we will need to build our PowerPoint. So let's say maybe a week in advance. Obviously, the sooner you can send anything, the better. So we can kind of have a look at what we need to do for that one. And that just about brings us to the end. So if you're not already on the FPS mailing list, please complete the embedded document. I'll send that out and email it to our email address. You'll then get all of our updates via our mailing list. I've already said this, but it's anticipated that the FPS will reopen every calendar year from this opening onwards, which may be more or less frequent depending on what is required by GMCA. So we anticipate that will probably be 2024 at this stage. You've got our email address and you have a link to our website. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and that brings us to the end. So I will just stop sharing and we can go through some of your questions. I know that Emily's been answering a lot as I've been talking, so hopefully that's been really helpful for you. But I know that some people might have additional questions.
There's one just on social value, and I understand that social value is a difficult one for some people, but unfortunately it is a mandatory requirement set by the government. We don't have an option in it, so it is important that we include it in all of our procurement processes. If you want some information on you know, how we can help with social value or whatever, just let us know and we can include some of that maybe in the back to basics and things like that as well. Maybe that's a good one to cover. We understand it's quite difficult, but unfortunately everything that we commission is social value anyway. So everything we're paying for is social value in terms of our contract delivery. So we are looking for some examples of where people have gone over and above.
The question about carbon footprint analysis, is that mandatory? The section's for information only, so you do need to complete the section, but you don't have to specifically say yes or no to anything, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely need to complete the section. But if you mark no to anything, you're not going to fail it.
Is question, sorry, do you want to go?
I was just going to read, is there a minimum time a company needs to have been trading for to pass the application?
There isn't, I think, is the answer. It's just around whether, if you're a really new organisation, have you got the evidence and information on to answer the questions in the way we're asking for them to be responded. If you haven't got that evidence, then you would be unsuccessful. So maybe it's a case of looking through it, seeing if you've got that information, if you've got that experience, and if not, maybe it's not the correct time yet. Maybe it's time to be in a supply chain for a little bit longer and then get some good examples to fill that in next time.
In terms of if an organisation is already part of the FPS and is updating details, is the close date and time the same? Yeah, it's all exactly the same. We have to kind of do this as one big thing due to the evaluation panels and timing for all of that.
Yeah, I think I answered that a little bit earlier on. Everyone's applications are on the same timeline because, as Molly said, as you can imagine, this is a huge piece of work, so it's just easier to keep it as simple as possible and not ask people to evaluate 5 different times.
Does anybody else have any questions? What I will do is I'll take all of the questions and answers that have been put into the chat today, and I'll pop them into our clarification question document, and I'll send that around when I send around the slides later.
I think Molly's already covered this, but well, I know Molly's already covered this. Thank you, Molly, because I am poorly, hence the no camera. But yeah, if you've got any feedback at all, you know, good, constructive, maybe something you think we could do with focusing on a little bit more, or something that would be helpful for your organisation, please just let us know. We have just started doing this recently. Oh God, can't talk. And we've always had good feedback, but we do know we can always develop. So if you just want to drop us an email or a message via the chest or just in the chat, just let us know if there's anything at all. Your feedback's really valuable to us, especially if it's around the Back to Basics workshop. If you are going to be attending that one, there's something you think we could go through in more detail. I know we've already talked about social value, but anything else, so it's really helpful and really important to us. So any feedback at all would be great. think we've managed to be quite quick again, Molly.
Yeah, definitely, which is great. Question from Simone. Thank you for that. We will. I think, Emily, do we want to cover that one about support to link with all organisations? Or one thing you can do, Simone, actually, is complete the contact sharing information sheet that I'll send around with this email. That basically it gives you a chance to kind of talk about what your organisation does deliver, and put your contact details in there, and that information you've then kind of given us permission to share with other organisations, and so that will mean that kind of you can get involved with supply chain activity and subcontracting delivery work. So that is something that yeah, I'd recommend you do.
Yeah, as Molly said, you can get involved as a subcontractor if you're not ready to be on the FPA. Sometimes it is just about having a look and thinking, are you ready for this? And if you're not, then that's probably the best way. We try and include people as much as we can, keep looking through the chest and stuff like that, because we advertise a lot of market engagement events for supply chain partners and things like that. So have a look at that. We've had another question on the Excel spreadsheet around the requirements matrix and the accredited quals page. I think that is the view on it. So if you go to the view, because it doesn't let me scroll down either, and just make sure that you've got no panes freeze. So if you press unfreeze pane, you should be able to go through that. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yes, so if you just go on it, onto the sheet, go to view and then freeze panes somewhere on the right and just press unfreeze panes, then you should be able to scroll down. But yeah, granted, we'll update that and put a new version on the chest to make sure it's not frozen for anyone.
Lovely. I think that is everything. So yeah, if anybody has any further questions, feel free to drop us a message on the chest. Hopefully we've given you quite a lot of information to think about today. Hopefully that wasn't too much information to take it. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week, and I hope everybody has a lovely Christmas and a nice break over the new year. Hope you'll get some good time off. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.